If you've been wondering how to treat and report your royalty income as an author, and if and how to legally and financially classify yourself as an author, including how to do your taxes, then this video is for you. Hi there, I'm Eevi, an award-winning children's author and ghostwriter over at eevijones.com and the creator of Children's Book University. I create videos specifically for children's authors, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. Now, before we dive in, I want to share my disclaimer I usually share in videos just like this one. Throughout this video, please remember that 1. I'm not an attorney or CPA, so be sure to consult with your lawyer and your tax consultant for any binding legal or tax advice. 2. Because I currently live in the US, this is the region or country this video will focus on. And 3. Every state is different and tax laws can change, so always consult the latest IRS guidelines or a tax professional for the most current rules. I've been asked so many times how to go about reporting our income as authors and what business structure, if any, would apply to us. It can be tricky and a bit overwhelming at first, but it doesn't have to be. So together, let's take it one step at a time. And if you already know me and my videos, you know that I will share something at the end that will help you with this even more. Now, how we treat and report our income we are making with our books greatly depends on how we see ourselves. What do I mean? The first thing we will want to consider is whether or not us being an author is a hobby or if we consider it more to be a business. This distinction is really important and significant for tax purposes because it affects the way our income and expenses are reported to the IRS. Interestingly, the IRS does not set a specific dollar amount at which a hobby income becomes classified as a business income. Instead, the distinction between a hobby and a business is based on the intent to make a profit and the regularity of our activity. The IRS considers our book writing a hobby if our main goal as the author is enjoyment, recreation, or personal enjoyment. And it considers our book writing a hobby if our writing is done sporadically or occasionally. On the other hand, the IRS considers our book writing a business if our main goal as the author is to make a profit and where we pursue our writing more regularly and continuously. So that's how the IRS distinguishes between a hobby and a business. It's not based on how much money we're making with our books, but what goal we are pursuing with our writing and how often we are writing. So let's take a closer look at each of these stages, zooming in on our writing being a hobby first. If this is mostly our first or second book and our books are mostly a passion project where our main goal is to simply share our beautiful story with future generations and we are writing for enjoyment and fun, then I would say us being an author is mostly a hobby. If we treat our book writing as a hobby, then there are no requirements to register our hobby with any government authority. That being said, we will always want to make sure to check with our own local authorities to be sure we are in compliance with local regulations. The only time we may need to register something is if we are operating under a different name other than our own legal name. If, for example, we are signing contracts or are receiving payments under a different name, then we may have to register what is called a DBA or a doing business as name. Now, authors often use a pen name to publish their work, right? So does this mean that as soon as we are using a pen name that we are automatically required to file a DBA registration? The answer here is no. If we simply publish our books under a pen name but still have our KDP account set up under our own legal name, and if we, for example, sign our illustrator agreement with our own legal name, then we won't need a DBA because the payments we receive and any agreements we may sign are still made under our own legal name. Now, as a hobby, how would we handle any income we may be earning? As a hobby, we will have to report all income earned from our hobby under the Other Income category on Schedule 1 of Form 1040. So this will include our earned royalties, for example. But what about our hobby-related expenses? A few years ago, hobby expenses could be deducted as itemized deduction on Schedule A. But this deduction was eliminated for tax years 2018 through 2025. So because of the current tax laws under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, hobby expenses are no longer deductible on our federal income tax return. This means that while we must report all income earned from a hobby, we cannot deduct related expenses. Now, while we have to report the income we are making with our hobby without being able to deduct any hobby-related expenses, the advantage of treating our book writing as a hobby hobby is that we do not have to pay a self-employment tax, which is currently 15.3%, no matter the level of hobby income. That being said, once our hobby starts generating significant income, or if we begin to treat it more like a business, that's when we might want to consider seeing it as a formal business entity, because that way we can potentially start benefiting from deducting certain business-related expenses. So again, if we only write occasionally and earn a relatively small amount from it without a profit motive, then reporting the author activities as a hobby would be the best way to go. Now let's look at our writing as a business next. If our main intention behind creating a children's book is to make money, and we dedicate a significant amount of our time to creating our children's book regularly, then the IRS would most likely consider this a business. That's when we are typically considered self-employed and would usually operate as a sole proprietor, meaning we would report any business income we are making as an author as a sole proprietor using Schedule C of the Form 1040, where our income includes anything that is writing related, like our book sales, royalties, and even speaking fees. A sole proprietor is simply an unregistered business entity that for the most part uses the single owner's name, which would be our name. So if we are operating as a sole proprietor where we are simply conducting business activities under our own legal name, we generally don't need to register our business with the state. But again, this will greatly depend on several factors, including where in the US we are located. So we will want to make sure to check with our own state requirements. If we are operating our business from home, which most of us will, we will also want to pay special attention to our local zoning laws because they might affect our ability to do so. So make sure you look into your state and local requirements. And just as before, we may need to register a DBA name if we operate and do business under a different name other than our own legal name. The advantage of seeing ourselves as a business is that our business expenses are deductible, even if that results in a loss that can offset other income, meaning the expenses we claim can be higher than the income we are making with our books. Some of these deductible expenses include things like materials and supplies we have used for our business, like paper, ink, pens, and printer cartridges. Money spent on marketing and promotion like advertising costs, website hosting, business cards, and promotional materials. Professional services like illustrating, consulting, editing, and formatting. Educational expenses, like my courses, for example. Any publishing costs we may have had, like the purchasing of our ISBN, and business-related software and subscription expenses, like Publisher Rocket, for example. Please note that these are all just examples and that this is not an extensive list. All these expenses must be both ordinary, meaning common and accepted in our field, and necessary, meaning they have to be helpful and appropriate for our business. If we want to claim these expenses instead of filing our standard deduction, we will want to make sure to maintain detailed records of all our expenses related to our business. And we would then file an itemized deduction using Schedule C of the Form 1040, meaning we will have to list all our expenses individually. Here I would recommend to only file an itemized deduction if our business-related expenses are larger than our standard deduction. Otherwise, we would just be better off to make use of our regular standard deduction, the way we usually would. The standard deduction amount varies according to our filing status. So these right here were the standard deduction amounts for the tax year 2024. If we file our taxes as single or married filing separately, our standard deduction would be $13,850. For married filing jointly or qualifying widows, our standard deduction is $27,700. And for the head of household filing, our standard deduction would be $20,800. If you're blind or 65 years or older, you have an even higher standard deduction. So again, unless our business-related expenses exceed these amounts, I would just stick with the standard deduction. Now, while we can potentially deduct our expenses, here is the main drawback of being a business. As a business, as soon as we realize annual net earnings of $400 or more, we have to pay self-employment tax, which at the making of this video is 15.3% throughout the US. 12.4% of that is for Social Security and 2.9% for Medicare. Net earnings is simply the income we are making with our books minus all the allowable business expenses. So if we consider ourselves a business and not a hobby and have a net earnings of $400 or more, we have to pay the self-employment tax. Now, you may be asking, Eevi, if I decide to take my writing a bit more seriously with the main goal to make a profit, where I start to spend a lot more time writing, where I essentially turn my hobby into a business, am I required to set up a legal entity like an LLC or another business structure in order to call myself a business? And the short answer is no. As already mentioned, once we start running our hobby more like a business, where our main goal now is to make a profit and where we write regularly, we are typically automatically considered self-employed and would simply file our taxes as a sole proprietor without needing to form a separate legal entity like an LLC or an S Corp, for example. Now, that being said, while an LLC is not necessary, some authors choose to form an LLC for liability protection. Here, it's important to know that setting up an LLC would, of course, involve additional costs and administrative requirements. So before going this route, we want to make sure to see if it's truly necessary, especially early on in our writing career. When it comes to how to treat our LLC for tax purposes, it's important to know that a single member LLC, where it's just us, is disregarded for federal tax purposes, meaning even though it's an LLC, it is simply treated as a business under a sole proprietorship. So if we already operated as a business, nothing would change, and we would simply just file our Schedule C again as a sole proprietor. If we choose to structure our business as an LLC, we will, however, need to register with our state's business registration agency. There are many paid agencies and services that help us with the setup of our LLC and all the filing requirements that come with that. Now, whenever I'm asked about the business side of being an author, one other question that always comes up as well is about imprints. So let's cover this really quickly as well. Are we as authors required to create or set up an imprint? Again, the short answer here is no. An imprint, in its simplest terms, is the name or brand under which we can publish our beautiful children's book along with our author name. It allows us authors to establish a brand identity, especially if we are planning on writing more than just one book. In my book, How to Self-Publish a Children's Book, I mentioned that I'm using my own imprint whenever I'm publishing one of my own children's books. But again, setting up an imprint is not necessary, nor does it require the setup of a DBA, as long as we are signing with our own legal name and are doing payments under our own legal name. If you have any questions regarding imprints, how it differs from publishers, when I would recommend setting one up, and if you want to know how to set up one yourself, I created a whole separate video on just that, so I made sure to share that in the description below. Now, this was quite a big topic, so if your head is spinning right now, don't worry. I'm such a visual person and I love flowcharts simply because they help me see when to take which step or action. So I went ahead and created a flowchart for you so that you can more easily determine which option might be the best option for you right now, wherever you may currently be on your author journey. I went ahead and shared the link to it in the description below, so feel absolutely free to download it and save it and hold on to it, because as we are growing as authors, our tax situation might change as well. What may be a hobby this year might turn into a beautiful, profitable business next year. All my videos content is original, and I absolutely love hearing how my ideas and thoughts I'm sharing in them help so many fellow authors. That's really the point, right? That's why I do what I do. But what is a bit discouraging and disheartening is to see how others take my ideas and share them as their own, most notably whenever I'm creating cheat sheets and printouts. So my only ask is that we always give credit where credit is due. That's so important within our creative world. This video especially required so much research, which is why there currently really isn't one single place that provides us authors with a definitive and clear answer on these tax-related topics. So always feel free to share, but please do point people in the direction where you learned these things from. I hope you found this video so helpful. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really encourages me to keep making free videos for you just like this one. Here's to taking the most beneficial next step as a children's author. Bye!